Well, I'll go ahead and start the meeting. I'm going to call the meeting of February the 10th, 2021 of the Indiana Environmental Rules Board to order. I'm going to call the roll to make sure that there is a quorum here. And then after that, I'm going to have Ryan go through the mechanics of this. You all have probably done enough Zoom that you're pretty familiar with it, but we'll review it. Mr. Etzler? When I call your name, say yes. Dr. Alexandrovich?
Yes.
You're here. Mr. Bortner?
Yes.
Ms. Collier?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Gilson?
Here.
Mr. Green?
Here.
Mr. Horn? Ms. Nelson?
Here.
Dr. Nemec?
Yes.
Commissioner Pickett?
Here.
Mr. Rulon? Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Ms. Valaquit? And Mr. Waskey?
Present.
German Guard Bill Etzler is on also. I was on mute, sorry.
12. So we have a quorum. Takes 8 to have a quorum. And no, we have 13 counting me. Okay, our first order of business today. Well, Brian, you go through the mechanics of this before we start on that.
Sure, happy to. Thank you, Chairwoman Guard, and thanks for everyone for joining us today. My name is Ryan Clem with IDEM Communications. We will be taking questions and comments from the public at today's meeting. If you have a question or a technical issue during the presentation, please use the raise hand or chat feature. And to access those features at the bottom or top of your screen, depending on what device you have, you'll see a menu in the middle or somewhere in that menu. There's a chat icon, which you can click on to show the chat dialogue. You should also see the raise hand option there. So please utilize the raise hand or chat features if you have any questions or comments, and you'll be called upon at the appropriate time. For those joining us via phone, you can also raise your hand by pressing *9, and we'll call on you then. When called upon, you'll also need to unmute your phone by pressing *6. For everyone in today's meeting, please identify yourself when speaking. If any members of the media have joined us, please utilize the chat feature or email media@idem.in.gov if you have any questions. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on IDEM's website. And with that, I'll turn the meeting back over to you, Chairwoman Guard.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate that. And thank all of you all for being here today. Our first order of business today is the approval of the summary of the November 18th, 2020 board meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the summary as presented? If not, I need a motion to approve them as distributed.
So move, Madam Chair. Dan Bortner.
Is there a second?
Second, RT Green.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? The minutes from November 18th, 2020 are approved. Nancy, it says on here, roll call. Is that necessary?
No.
Okay. Commissioner Pickett, you have a report.
Thank you, Chairwoman Guard. I appreciate everybody's attendance today. I've got 3 things I want to report on. First, one of our metrics in terms of how we're doing as an agency. As you know, the COVID pandemic has really impacted the work of a lot of people. Not only are people working at home, but to some degree, some of the work that some organizations do has been kind of cut back a little bit. At IDEM, some of our inspections had been reduced for some period of time during the big lockdown period or hunker down period, as Governor Holcomb had indicated. But for the most part, we're back up and doing all our inspections. In terms of the work we're doing, we measure progress in terms of our permits, our water quality, our air quality, and our inspections. In terms of permits, we continue to issue permits in less time than is allocated under statute, and in about 65% of the time allowed. So we're pretty happy with that. We've got a couple of big permits that we're working on, one of which is the U.S. Steel Gary Works permit. Paul Higginbotham and his group in the Office of Water Quality are diligently working to issue or reissue that permit. It's probably the biggest permit that the Office of Water issues. But we're doing really well overall in terms of getting our permits done on time in real time. And so I'm proud of all the folks in each of the program areas for the work they're doing in that respect. In terms of inspections, we set a new goal in 2017 of getting our inspection reports done in 7 days after we conduct an inspection on average. We recognize some inspections are really big, need some more time, and putting together a report would take some more time. But we set this ambitious goal at a time when most of our inspection reports were issued in 45 days, not 7 days. I'm able to report today that on average, we get our inspections done today, and the inspection report out to facilities in just over 4 days after an inspection is conducted. So we've become quite efficient at getting our inspection reports out. Our water quality, drinking water quality continues to be good, whereas 99% of the citizens in the state of Indiana drink safe and clean water. Those that report violations are largely paperwork violations. Air quality is improving. Our national ambient air quality standards, we're getting better and better. We've been working, and over the last year have had more redesignations to attainment than we have had in several years. So I feel as though our core work has been done very well. With some of the untold stories are the work that people who aren't attached to permits or compliance metrics do on a daily basis. Not only do we have permit writers or inspectors, but we also have a group of scientists throughout our agency that conduct work both in air quality, in land quality, and in water quality. And you know, they do really good work, and they've been working really hard. In our Office of Water Quality, for example, many states have reported that they haven't been able to get out and do all of the sampling that we're required to do in order to ensure that we have a good sense of the water quality around the state. In our state, however, our folks have been able to get out and meet all of the EPA commitments in terms of our probabilistic sampling. And there's one project I want to share with you today that bears just a little backstory before I jump into it. I'm going to share my screen with you in a minute, but first, I want to say that 21 years ago, I joined the Department of Environmental Management. And just before, I mean, a month before I joined, there was an environmental emergency on the White River, known these days as the White River fish kill. Over 1 million fish were killed on the White River in 1999, at the end of 1999, when a corporation called the Guide Corporation emptied out its wastewater treatment facility into Anderson and killed the Anderson wastewater treatment plant and emptied its contents out into the White River, which ended up killing, as I indicated, 1 million fish and resulted in probably the worst environmental catastrophe that we've had since the inception of the agency. And that really helped to focus the agency a lot. We've improved our emergency response capabilities as a result of that project. We also received a good deal of money, and many people, both at the Department of Natural Resources and at the Department of Environmental Management, were assigned the task of taking the proceeds we received from penalties associated with the Guide Corporation to restoring the White River. I know Beth Admire and Nancy King and Carl at DNR worked really hard to help fund projects to restore the White River. And 20 years later, our watershed assessment and planning folks undertook a project called the 2020 White River Maine Stem Project. And one of the purposes of this project was to determine what does the White River look like today? So today I want to share with you a little bit of the work that our watershed assessment and planning branch has undertaken. Can you see my shared screen? If you can, you'd see it says 2020 White River Main Stem Project. Can you see that on your screen? You can, good. Okay, so this is available on our website. It's a story map. The White River is a long and winding river that goes through the heart of Indiana, and it's important, and because it goes through many streams, many urban centers in the city, and it's in rural areas. Our staff decided that they wanted to go out and assess the conditions of the West Fork of the White River and the White River from its headwaters to the Wabash River. You can look at this project. The White River Main Stem Project is at our website. And I'm going to give you just a short look at what you'll see if you take a look at this. We entered into a massive project to help investigate what does the White River look like today. The White River is 356 miles. It goes through urban areas and rural areas that look like this, which are beautiful, and areas that are frankly much more urban. And you see all sorts of wildlife around there. Let me just show you a couple of the some of the locations that we looked at. You can see on this map all the red is essentially the White River. And when I place my cursor over this map, you can see indicators pop up. All of those indicators are places where the agency sampled to try to get an understanding of what the health of the White River looks like today. If you visit the website and take a look at this, you can see pictures of the places we sampled, and they're on the left-hand part of the screen. And you can click on them, and it'll show you where we sampled, what it looks like from an aerial perspective, and what it looks like on the ground. It's a really great story map that shows the work that our folks did to determine what water quality looks like in the White River. And we sampled at hundreds of locations. We sampled taking samples of the water. We collected fish with shocking. We looked at macroinvertebrates. We conducted outreach events, and we've put it all on the website, all the work that our folks did to look at the water quality in the White River. And I would just urge you, if you get a minute, to take a look at this website, and because it's really useful. It highlights the quality and how the work that has been done by the Department of Natural Resources and IDEM has actively restored the river and made the river once again a vibrant place. It shows where we conducted our sampling, both in urban areas and in rural areas in terms of shocking fish. This is a picture of a boat that we used in the areas we did electrofishing, where you put electricity in the water and grab the fish with nets, and the different kinds of fish we collected. This project is currently still underway. We collected 17,230 fish, 94 species, and you can see, if you look at the map, the different kinds of fish that were collected at the different sites and what we would consider the health of the areas that we sampled. Because it's a diverse area with a variety of different kinds of fish, you can see that some areas, and you can see the map, it's really intuitive. A red dot would indicate that we think that the health of the river at that place may be impacted, that maybe you didn't see a wide variety of fish populations. A green dot would be pretty darn good, and a blue dot is even better. We measured that by the variety of species and methodologies that we used, including an index of biological integrity. And we measured the water quality by looking at water chemistry in those areas as well. This effort was undertaken by the staff. It was undertaken as a result of scientific curiosity about how have we fared since the White River fish kill, and how have we done in terms of restoring the quality of the river. And I'm really proud of the staff. They've done not only a great job of getting out there and collecting this information by going out into the streams, but also of putting this in a format that is easy to view, is basically understandable by the general public, and provides people with a good sense of what the river looks like, both pictorially and in a narrative format. So I just want to say that if you get a chance, you should take a look at this. I could go on and on about this, but I don't have all day to talk about it. But our staff were out there in the field looking at these, the water quality, and the website explains what we did in a way that is easy to understand, and I think very valuable. So again, I would urge you all to take a look at the story. We call it a story map that contains information about the White River Main Stem project. It's a wonderful effort by our staff, and I'm just really pleased with the work that was done. Joanne, you had raised your hand, and I wanted to be able to answer your question.
Thank you, Bruno. That is a really neat study. Sounds like. Look forward to checking out the website. But I have 3 questions. I'm wondering, how many are there CSOs on the White River that was studied? Does any of the data that's been collected shed light on our question of the recreational water quality criteria? And my third is, how much time was put into this? How long did the study take?
Geez, I don't have the answer in terms of how long the study took. It was, well, although Eileen Hack is on. Eileen, I don't know if you can turn on your microphone, but if you can, and you can answer that question. It was during 2020, but and it may have taken all summer long, but I don't know if it was even before that. Eileen, are you there and able to answer that?
I am, and I believe they started in the spring. I know they went through October, so there were They collected water chemistry samples in the spring, summer, and fall. And then some of the fish samples were collected towards August, September, October area. And then they also collected aquatic insect samples. So it was a pretty intensive effort from the spring through really, I think, almost the end of October.
The project did collect water chemistry, and when I talked to staff, they had not finished evaluating the water chemistry. So it's a project where you take just a ton of samples, and then we don't have a real read yet on the water chemistry aspect of this in terms of what it looked like. It's easier, of course, to understand what kind of fish you can collect, and you get some immediate feedback when you're out in the field. But the water chemistry will take some time to evaluate. So I'm not sure that we can make any conclusions about the water chemistry that would assist in terms of the 2012 REC criteria. I will say I'd expect that E. coli levels would be lower, despite the fact that the sampling ran through different areas of very large communities that are under federal consent decrees, including Indianapolis. If I remember correctly, one of the sampling locations was right on New York Street, and therefore, and I'm trying to pick it up, there's a picture of it on the screen now. And so it wound its way through different areas that did include areas impacted or downstream of CSOs. I think this site, that's New York Street again, may have actually, maybe it's not New York Street, but one below it, where it was awfully close to discharge points along CSOs in wastewater treatment facility. At least that was my recollection when I saw the sampling points earlier. So yes, Harding Street, that's the one. I thought, you know, I bet that's really close to the outfall for the Maine wastewater treatment plant. Now, of course, the other sampling locations also, you know, have been influenced by CSO discharges. In Indianapolis, for example, there are about 144 CSO outfalls. In Anderson and in Muncie, there are CSO outfalls as well, and all of that travels downstream. So it's inevitable that the water chemistry samples we took would capture levels of pollutants that could be influenced by CSOs, but we don't have complete data in terms of what you know, what that can tell us for especially the REC criteria. Very good question, though. Thank you.
Bruno, that was just fascinating. Thank you for showing us that. How many years do you think it took the river to get to the point that the wildlife was coming back?
Boy, you know, I don't have a quick answer to that. You know, Nancy's worked very closely with Beth Admire, and I know that over the years and since the settlement with the Department of Justice and the funds that came in, we did spend at least a decade improving that water body, if not more. And Nancy, do you have any kind of idea of how long before we saw results from your conversations with Beth or DNR in this regard?
Yeah, actually, I think Beth is on, and I think she could
good.
give some more accurate information. She was the trustee who worked on it a little more than I did back then. So I think, Beth, if you're on, if you could give some information on that, that would be great.
Hey, Beth.
Hey, hi, everybody. Beth Admire talking. After the White River Fish Kill settlement, we restocked a number of fish in the White River. We revisited our restocking effort at 5 and 10 years, and it really was making a good bit of difference in the river. Obviously, the City of Indianapolis, the Clean Water Act Authority now, undertook a pretty lengthy combined sewer overflow long-term control plan to abate the combined sewer overflows in the White River. So that is also assisting the recovery. Interestingly, we initiated at IDEM after the White River fish kill a series of White River cleanups where a number of our employees would go out into the river and just pick up trash. That has continued not only at IDEM, but all along the river for years and years. I actually just received a newspaper article last year where a football team did a river cleanup as part of its community service.
Yeah, it's been a really great effort, and you know, the credit goes to a whole bunch of people. We've worked in concert with DNR. Beth, do you want to talk about some of the folks at DNR that have worked on this with us?
Sure. Well, Bill James was one of the primary people to work on this. A couple of folks have retired. Bill James, John Davis just recently retired. Carl Woodrich, who is the Natural Resource Damages Program Manager at DNR, was actually at IDEM and started working on the White River restoration with us, and he's now over at DNR. So there has been a really large co-agency effort, if you will, in the White River.
Yeah, it's been terrific. And not only have we increased the fish population through the restocking efforts, not only have we tried to restore habitat, but we've also tried to increase the recreational opportunities for individuals. I believe you guys have put in boat ramps throughout the area, and so the effort has been really multifactorial and has been really quite successful. And I think that the White River Main Stem Assessment Project will highlight just how resilient the river has been despite a really huge environmental impact. But it needed help, and it got it. It got it from devoted public servants like Beth and Carl and a whole bunch of people who spent time and NRD money to ensure that we restored the river. And I'm just so excited about the progress we're going to make because of the work that the Citizens Energy in the cities of Muncie and Anderson are doing to reduce their CSO overflows dramatically. And that will have such a huge impact on the river. Just a real success story, I will say. So Beth, thanks to you. Thanks to all of our partners for that work, and the Watershed Assessment and Planning Branch. Thank you guys for all the work you've done to conduct this assessment and not only make it a scientific endeavor, but something that the public can visit and see and understand. We're also doing outreach events. I think we're doing an outreach event in February for this project as well. So we're trying to get the word out regarding our project and let people know where they can go to see what the river looks like. Our next, let's see. Oh, it looks like our next outreach event. Well, we had one in February 4th. It looked like. July 17th, we're going to have a free paddle Friday in White River Alliance annual meeting at the White River Canoe Company. We're just working with as many partners as possible to ensure that we have, increased awareness of the success of this project. So I really wanted to bring that news to you folks on the board, because so often we talk about the rules, but we talk about, stuff like permits, but we don't get to see some of the progress that we make in other areas in our agency and with our partners in other agencies. So that was the second thing I wanted to bring up. The third thing I wanted to talk about, and then I'll excuse myself from talking, is the legislative session. There's one bill that IDEM has been interested in. On every session, we generally have some proposed legislation, and this year's no exception. Some very minor adjustments to the laws that we were seeking in our agency legislation. One of which is we have a program where we verify tax exemptions for industries that are they're putting in place pollution control equipment, especially for water quality. And we really don't think the agency should be in the tax exemption business. So we're seeking to extract the agency from that process, although we'd be happy to be consulted if necessary. The other is, one of the things we're working on is rules regarding fees. And you'll see as we come up through the year, proposals for fee increases in the Office of Water Quality and the Office of Land Quality. The legislature, of course, as you know, allowed the Environmental Rules Board to approve fee increases for the Department of Environmental Management. We've, as you will remember, proposed fee increases for the Office of Air Quality, which were approved, and will come forward for water as well. We had a deadline for getting that done of early next year. And given the pace of our rulemakings and the required number of public hearings and the input and the importance of this project, we're seeking to push that deadline back a year so that we can have the appropriate input and so that you folks have the appropriate ability to consider what we're asking for in terms of fee increases. So that bill was introduced by Senator Messmer, the chair of the Senate Environment Committee, and it did not include the fee increase, the deadline for fee increase submissions being pushed back, but it did have the other provisions. It passed through the Senate and will be considered in the House. And so we're hoping that goes through. The other bill that we're really watching is Senate Bill 389. Senate Bill 389 was introduced by Senator Garton and was heard in Senator Messmer's Environment Committee. This bill is a fairly simple bill. It simply removes IDEM from the ability to protect wetlands that are not protected under federal law. Currently, in the early 2000s, the Supreme Court, in a decision called the Swank decision, limited the jurisdiction of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers over wetlands to water bodies that were abutting or wetlands that abutted waters of the United States. And the other wetlands, which aren't any different in function or performance, were left unprotected. Foresighted legislators passed a law that allowed IDEM to protect those other state wetlands. And we've operated a state wetland program. We call it an isolated wetland program, although the wetlands couldn't be really defined as all isolated. It just describes their distance from a navigable water body. But IDEM has the authority currently under law to protect all of those wetlands. And this bill would eliminate the protection of those wetlands. And it was heard in the House, in the Senate. It passed the Senate Environment Committee. It was heard in the full Senate and passed out of the full Senate. It will be considered in the House of Representatives. We testified against the bill. We believe that wetlands are important. One of the stories that you may remember is the story of the Grand Kankakee Marsh. 100 years ago, almost exactly, the Grand Kankakee Marsh was the second largest wetlands in the United States. And it stretched from South Bend all the way to Illinois and into Illinois. And that wetland area did make it hard for transportation routes and for farming. And as a result, the state of Indiana decided to invest money to drain those wetlands and to straighten and channelize the Kankakee River, which stretched for 240 miles and was really sinuous. It had over 2,000 bends and curves in it. It was straightened out and became a river that was about 80 miles instead of 240 river miles long. It was deepened. And while that effort helped to ensure that more farmland was created, it also had some negative consequences. Almost immediately, it resulted in flooding in that area, and flooding that has existed now for 100 years. And ever since that time, the state has invested money to try to increase the number of floodplains and expand the number of wetlands that exist in that area, because wetlands and floodplains help to store water and reduce flooding. And that's one of the huge economic consequences of impacting our wetlands, is the loss of the ability to control flooding. And so one of the big arguments that we've got about removing protections for these wetlands that are not protected under the federal law is to consider the economic benefit that the wetlands provide. There certainly are stories that some of the wetlands that we are charged with protecting are mere wet spots in farm fields, but most of the time that's just not the case. And we're finding that the wetlands that we do protect help provide resources not only for preventing flooding, but also recharging our groundwater aquifers, filtering pollutants out, and ensuring that most of our drinking water systems, most of whom get their water from the ground, are able to get safe and clean water to the residents in the state of Indiana. We've testified against the legislation, and so has the Department of Natural Resources. The governor's expressed concern about this legislation, and we will be meeting with members of the House Environment Committee and folks to talk about how we might address concerns that some people have raised and transform this legislation into something that is actually improves the program instead of eliminating the program. And so that's the big bill that we're looking at today. That's my report, Senator Gard, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yes, are there any questions? Joanne has her hand up, and afterwards I want to make some comments about the wetlands bill as well.
Thanks, Chairman Gard. Bruno, do you have any, can you give us a rough estimate of how many acres would no longer be protected and how that compares to what will remain protected?
Yes, we do. I believe about 80. So, and I don't have the figures in front of me, but we do have them. And I would just say that of the remaining wetlands in the state, about 85% of them would be protected under our current state law, and the remainder under the federal law. So by eliminating the protection eliminating this law, we lose the protection of the vast majority of wetlands that exist today. And now to get more precise figures, and we're happy to do so, we'll get our folks to provide that. And I know we've got that information. I just don't have it right in front of me.
Anyone else have a question? Well, Bruno, thank you for giving that report on the legislature. And I want to make a couple of comments about Senate Bill 389. I am really concerned if this bill passes. I've just been really concerned about it. I was the lead sponsor on the bill, Representative Wilkins. It was a House bill. He was the author of the bill. And this, we worked hard for a long time on this bill. It wasn't something that was just thrown together before a session. Back then we had the Environmental Quality Service Council, and we spent some time during the summer studying the issue. The Swank decision had not been out for too long, and you needed to understand that before you could really delve into this. This is really very complicated when you get into it. It's not easy. Of these isolated wetlands, now there are various classifications of those wetlands depending on a number of things. But I think a lot of the legislators very few of them were around at the Swank decision, and most of them don't have any idea what the Swank decision says or does and the relationship there. So if any of you know any of these House members very well and have some influence, I think it's appropriate to talk to them about it. But I am really concerned about it. Before I lose my voice, let me call on Chris Peterson for the rulemaking report.
Good afternoon. I'm Chris Peterson in the Rules Development Branch of the Office of Legal Counsel. The next board meeting is tentatively scheduled for May 12th, 2021, and it will also be a Zoom meeting. At that meeting, we anticipate presenting 2 final adoption and 3 preliminary adoption rulemakings. The NOx emissions monitoring rule was preliminarily adopted in November, and that rule revises the existing monitoring and reporting requirements for certain large fossil fuel boilers to add an alternative for monitoring and reporting of NOx emissions that is consistent with the federal requirements. Also, the metals criteria rulemaking was also preliminarily adopted in November. This rule revises Indiana's aquatic life and human health ambient water quality criteria for certain metals. It's based on federal recommendations and current science. Some proposed criteria would be more stringent and some less stringent than the current criteria. This rule is getting ready to go into a comment period, and so the schedule of the rulemaking is dependent on the number and complexity of the comments that are received. For preliminary adoption, the solid waste financial assurance rulemaking is scheduled for May, and that rule revises the financial assurance requirements for solid waste facilities to provide compliance flexibility and to improve the administration of the financial assurance requirements. It also resolves inconsistencies across financial assurance requirements for various waste programs. The satellite manure storage structure reference updates rulemaking. It updates references to the Natural Resources Conservation Service standards for the design and construction of satellite manure storage structures to be consistent with the standards for similar structures at confined feeding operations. And finally, the BP temporary alternative opacity limitations rule. This establishes a temporary alternative opacity limitation for the BP Whiting refinery in Lake County at the request of the company. The alternative limits are requested to reduce the risk for explosions from emissions passing through electrostatic precipitators during startup, shutdown, and hot standby events. And that is my update on upcoming rules. I'll be happy to answer any questions about the agency rulemakings or schedules.
Are there any questions for Chris on rulemaking? If not, thank you, Chris. Today, we will have hearings and board action on final adoption of the following rules: coal cleaning, degreasing alternative, hazardous waste financial assurance, and Vertellus particulate matter revisions. I'm not pronouncing that right at all. After board action on the rules, there will be a board discussion of the hearing on the citizens petition that we held on October 28th. The rules being considered at today's meeting were included in the board packet and are available for public inspection on the IDEM website at least 1 week prior to each of the board meetings. A written transcript of today's meeting will be made. The transcript and any written submissions will be open for public inspection at the Office of Legal Counsel. A copy of the transcript will be posted on the rules page of the agency website when it becomes available. Now we'll move on to the public hearing. This is a public hearing before the Environmental Rules Board of the State of Indiana concerning final adoption of amendments to rules at 326 IC 8-3 coal cleaning degreasing alternative rules. The proposed rule as preliminarily adopted found in today's board packet is entered into the record of the hearing. Kayleen Walsh will present the rules to the board.
Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm Keelan Walsh with the Rules Development section of the Office of Legal Counsel. And I'm presenting rule number 18-542, coal cleaning degreasing alternative for your consideration. Coal cleaning is one of 4 types of degreasing operations in which industrial sources dip or spray machinery parts with a solvent. Indiana's current state rule at 326 IAC 8-3-8 requires sources operating coal cleaner degreases to utilize a low vapor pressure solvent for cleaning or degreasing machine parts. The current rule does not provide an option for sources to use a higher vapor pressure solvent with a control device. IDEM is proposing to amend 326 IAC 831, 832, 833, 834, and 838 to allow for the use of an alternative control device for solvents with a higher vapor pressure in order to control emissions from coal cleaning degreasing activities for users currently required to use a low vapor pressure solvent to comply with the state rule. These amendments are consistent with US EPA regulations and will ensure smoother and more efficient operations for industrial sources in the state. This rule is being presented again for final adoption because the proposed rule published in the Indiana Register on January 22nd, 2020, unintentionally omitted several comments that were received during the second notice of comment period. A new proposed rule was published in the Register on January 6, 2021 that contains the comments received during the second notice of comment period. The comments and responses were included in the board packet for the preliminary adoption hearing on January 8, 2020, and the draft rule included all the changes related to those comments. IDEM requests that the board final adopt this rule as presented, and program staff are available to answer any further questions you may have. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Kayleen or anybody else on this rule? Thank you, Kayleen. Who has signed up to speak on the rule? No one. Okay. The board will now consider final adoption of amendments to 326 IC 8-3 coal cleaner degreasing alternative rules. Is there any board discussion? Is there a motion to final adopt items proposed rules as presented?
So moved, Calvin.
Is there a second?
Moved, Katie.
We'll call the roll. Mr. Etzler,
Yes.
Dr. Alexandrovich,
Yes.
Mr. Bortner,
Yes.
Ms. Collier,
yes,
Mr. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Gilson,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Horn, Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Dr. Nemick,
Yes.
Mr. Rulon, Mr. Schuler,
Yes.
Ms. Valaquit, Mr. Waskey,
Yes.
and the chair votes aye. The rule is adopted with 12 ayes and 0 nays. This is a public hearing before the Environmental Rules Board of the State of Indiana concerning final adoption of amendments to rules at 329 IEC 3.1-14 and 329 IEC 3.1-15 hazardous waste financial assurance rules. The proposed rules is as preliminarily adopted with items suggested changes incorporated and found in today's board packet is entered into the record of the hearing. Dan Watts will present the rule to the board. Dan?
Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm Dan Watts of the Rules Development Branch. I'm presenting LSA document 14-287 for final adoption. This rulemaking makes vital updates and corrections to address longstanding issues in the hazardous waste financial assurance rules at 329 IAC 3.1-14 and 3.1-15. The main amendments in the rulemaking include adding specific financial assurance requirements for hazardous waste facilities subject to corrective action, making corrections to the wording of the financial assurance forms, updating rule language to comport with current rules drafting standards, and making any other needed changes or corrections observed in the rule language. Since the preliminary adoption of the rulemaking, changes to the rule proposed for final adoption have been limited to typographical and formatting errors or rephrasing of rule language based on LSA recommendations. An example is replacing the legacy phrase pursuant to with the more accurate in accordance with. And in addition, based on comments received during the preliminary adoption hearing, or more so a suggestion received during that hearing, the usages of insure versus insured were examined in the proposed rule language, and IDEM did not find any additional instances in which the terms were used incorrectly. Lastly, during the third comment period held between preliminary and final adoption, no comments were received. Representatives from IDEM are available to answer any questions that you may have for this rulemaking. The department requests that the board adopt this rule so IDEM can move forward with these vital updates to the hazardous waste financial assurance rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Are there any questions for Dan or any of the other IDEM people that are present? If not, is there anybody that has signed up to speak on this final adoption? Okay, with that, the hearing is concluded. The board will now consider final adoption of amendments to 326 IAC 3.1-14 and 329 IAC 3.1-15 hazardous waste financial assurance rules. Any board discussion? Do I hear a motion to adopt items suggested changes to the rule?
So moved.
Is there a
So
second?
let's,
I'm going to call the roll. Mr. Etzler,
yes.
Dr. Alexandrovich,
Yes.
Mr. Bortner,
Yes.
Ms. Collier,
Yes.
Mr. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Gilson,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Horn, Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Dr. Nemec,
Yes.
Mr. Rulon, Mr. Schuler,
Yes.
Ms. Valaquit, Ms. Valaquit, Mr. Woski,
Yes.
the chair votes aye. The vote is 12 ayes, 0 nays. The changes are adopted. Is there a motion to adopt Indiana's proposed rule as amended?
So moved, Bill Etzler.
Is there a second?
Second, RT Green.
Call the roll. Mr. Etzler,
Yes.
Dr. Alexandrovich,
Yes.
Mr. Bortner,
Yes.
Ms. Collier,
Yes.
Mr. Davison,
Yes.
Mr. Gilson,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Dr. Nemec,
Yes.
Mr. Schuler,
Yes.
Ms. Valaquit, Mr. Woski,
Yes.
and the chair votes aye. The proposed rule is adopted 12-0. Okay, this is a public hearing before the Environmental Rules Board of the State of Indiana concerning final adoption of amendments to rules at 326 IC 6.5-6-31. Vertellus particulate matter revisions. The proposed rule as preliminarily adopted found in today's board packet is entered into the record of the hearing. Kayleen Walsh will present the rule to the board.
Hello again, I'm Keelan Walsh and I'm presenting rule number 19-82, Vertellus emission limits updates for your consideration. Vertellus is a chemical manufacturing company in Indianapolis, Indiana, and has requested revisions to its particulate matter emission limits listed at 326 IAC 6.5-6-31. These revisions remove units that are no longer operating or have been demolished at the facility, make changes to particulate matter emission limits on other units impacted by US EPA's recently adopted sulfur dioxide limits at 326 IAC 7-4-2.1A4, update existing language and add new language pertaining to the types of gases burned in certain units. Marion County's 1-hour SO2 monitoring data was found to exceed the 1-hour national ambient air quality standard of 75 parts per billion for the period between 2010 through 2012, and the county was consequently designated as non-attainment by US EPA. The 2010 1-hour SO2 limits were incorporated into Indiana's state implementation plan on January 1st, 2017, and therefore revisions are required for some sources listed at 326 IAC 7-4-2.1 in order to demonstrate attainment of the new 1-hour SO2 standard. Additionally, petroleum oil was burned at several Vertellus units, which helped contribute to monitored violations of the 1-hour SO2 standard in Marion County. These units have since switch to burning natural gas, which reduces SO2 emissions and allows Vertellus to remain in compliance with its revised SO2 limits to ensure continued attainment of the 1 hour SO2 standard. Revisions to the particulate matter emission limits at 326 IAC 6.5-6-31 are needed for consistency with the process changes that Vertellus has made to comply with the new SO2 standards. Finally, language is being added at 326 IAC 6.5-6-31B2 to indicate that certain units burn both natural and landfill gases. Increases in several emission limits represent adjustments in the potential amount of natural gas a unit can burn rather than the actual amount of gas burned, and modeling has shown no increased emission concentrations at the modeled receptors. Vertellus anticipates that switching from petroleum fuels to natural gas, as well as reducing the amount of landfill gas burned, will result in an emissions decrease of 14.1 tons per year as compared to the amount currently listed in Indiana SIP, and allow the area to demonstrate attainment of US EPA's national ambient air quality standards. Once the revisions in this rulemaking are completed, IDEM will submit the final rule to US EPA as a SIP revision. IDEM requests that the board final adopt this rule as presented, and program staff are available to answer any further questions you have. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Kayleen or any of the other staff? Okay, are there any people that have signed up to speak? Anybody not signed up want to speak? This hearing is concluded. The board will now consider final adoption of amendments to 326 IAC 6.5-6-31 Vertellus particulate matter revisions. Is there any board discussion? Need a motion to final adopt items, proposed rules as presented.
So moved, Calvin.
Is there a second?
RT Green, second.
Roll call. Mr. Etzler,
Yes.
Dr. Alexandrovich,
Yes.
Mr. Bortner,
Yes.
Ms. Collier,
Yes.
Mr. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Gilson,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Dr. Nemec,
Yes.
Mr. Schuler,
Yes.
Mr. Waskey,
Yes.
and the chair votes aye. The rule is final adopted, 12 ayes, 0 nays. Now we're going to go into the citizens petition discussion. This will be an open discussion on the citizens petition hearing that was held on October the 24th of last year. Most of our board members were able to attend, and hopefully those that weren't have viewed the hearing, which was placed on the IDEM website shortly after the public hearing. Documents from the hearing were included or were provided to board members and were also placed on the website. As noted in the question list provided in the board packet, 3 sets of questions were submitted. Shortly before the board packet was sent out, the petitioners requested additional time to respond in writing. When both sides have completed their responses, they will be provided to the board, and we will continue our discussions at the next board meeting. While we do not have the responses for the discussion today, we have in the past generally used this time to ask questions of those who have testified and the agency. I know some board members may have additional questions for IDEM or the petitioners. Several of the petitioners are with us today, as well as agency technical staff to assist our discussion. Could those of you speaking for the petitioners today, please identify yourselves. Do we know who's going to be speaking for the petitioners, if anybody? Ryan, do you see anybody?
I do not, Chair Guard.
Okay, I
Well,
see.
I'm sorry, we do have Tim Healy has his hand up.
Yeah, his hand just came up. Let's see. Okay. Martha, could you please introduce the item staff in the meeting today available to answer questions?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Martha Clark Metler. I'm the Assistant Commissioner of the Office of Water Quality. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank the board members who submitted questions. It's obvious you all been thinking about this, and some of them are quite challenging, and we're working on getting responses. And happy to answer any other questions you have today. We've got Paul Higginbotham, who is the Deputy Assistant Commissioner of the Office of Water Quality, and Jerry Dittmer, who is the Chief of our Permits Branch. And any of us can field questions that you may have. And I just saw Craig Williams' picture pop up, and he's one of the lead spokespeople for the petitioners. So I thought I'd introduce him too.
Okay, thank you, Martha. During the testimony, we heard about the discussion between IDEM and the petitioners on this subject in the past. I think it would be beneficial for both sides to use the time between now and the next meeting to share and discuss their responses with each other and work on developing options for the board to consider what the next steps would be. And I'd like to really encourage the petitioners to sit down with IDEM. And it seemed to me that there was a process in the statute. And I know that because we worked on this for quite some time, there was a provision in there that I thought would take care of the situation that you find yourself in now. But it was a provision that essentially said when you reach that point of really diminishing returns based on your investment, that was as far as you were expected to go. And I still don't understand why that hasn't worked for you all. And whether the process hasn't been followed correctly or what the issue is. But I really would like to know what there is in the current statute that makes that unworkable. Is there any more discussion from the board on this? Questions that they want to ask?
Chairwoman Guard, this is Craig Williams. If I could speak to our efforts to date.
Yes, please do.
Thank you. First of all, thank you everybody for the submission of your questions. As we were moving through them, we realized that we feel that our ask is simple on its face. We're simply asking to find the regulatory compliance that the 94 policy provides, but the application of that is complex and involves a lot of moving parts. And as we begin working through the questions that were provided, we felt that we really needed to take the time to dig into them and provide thorough answers. We are in the process of reaching out to Paul and his crew to try to set up maybe some calls or meetings in early March. And as long as he and his staff are on board with it, I think our desire is to try to get a single document returned to the rules board with all the questions and our responses in one place. That way it'll be, I think, easier to see where we come together, where we agree, and the places where we may have some differences might help provide us the ability to sort of get a direction on where we need to move going forward. So we look forward to that, and rest assured, we have been very well received by the agency for the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. I think this has been a topic of discussion. And as I think Paul alluded to at the last meeting, we just sort of felt that we couldn't find an appropriate way to get us to that place of regulatory compliance or regulatory certainty that we were seeking. And we've brought on a couple folks that I think are going to help us find some pathways to do that. So we look forward to working with them all, and just appreciate your patience in this process.
Well, thank you, Craig. We appreciate the time that you are putting on this and are going to put on this. This, as you alluded to, it seems simple on the surface, but it's quite complicated when you really get into the weeds. And you still have water quality standards you're going to have to meet, and so how the process you use to get there, we're going to have to talk about. Are there any questions from the board for Mr. Williams or the other? There are two people with their hands up, and I can't see. Dr. Alexandrovich, and then the other one doesn't have a name.
Paul Higginbotham's the other one.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Joanne, and then we'll get to Paul.
Thank you. As many people might recognize, I'm never short of questions. I just want to make sure, ask Craig, because I did submit questions, surprise, surprise. And Nancy asked me who to direct the questions to. And I kind of went through them and said, this one's maybe for IDEM and this one's for the petitioners. So, but, I didn't want to limit it to that. So Craig, I just want to make sure that you've gone through the whole set of questions and you feel like you can speak to them if you want to.
Thank you very much. We are going through both sets of questions, and there are some that are just very obviously for the agency to answer, but there are some that we think that we'd be able to provide a little bit of insight to as well. And so we've received the whole list and we're working through both sets. Thank you.
So did I understand you said that you and IDEM have agreed that it will be, all these responses are going to be in one document?
We'll be working with Paul as long as Paul and his team are amenable to that. That is our desire. We felt that may help. That way you're not trying to refer to a bunch of different documents. That we thought that might help bring a little bit of congruity to the whole process. Yes.
And if you can agree on an answer, that means you're at least on the same page to start.
Sure.
Thank you.
Paul.
Thank you, Chairwoman Gard. I just wanted to kind of reiterate what you had mentioned, as well as Craig. And yes, we are more than willing to sit down with the petitioners and Craig and his folks, and it'd actually probably be more beneficial for the board for us to do that, to have those discussions and bring something back to you guys at a future meeting. It'll help us work through those issues the best we can. I'm sure there may be spots where we'll have to agree to disagree, but at least we'll have those noted accordingly. But we worked well with these folks, and we'll continue to do that to try to find some type of resolution to move things forward.
Thank you. We appreciate that. And I would really like an answer as to why the current, what we call knee of the curve provision in the current statute isn't adequate for their situation. And so if you can make sure that question's answered during your deliberations, I appreciate that. Any other comments, questions for either the petitioners or IDEM staff? No? Okay. Well, if there aren't, we'll move on to open forum. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to I don't know if you can hear that phone, but I could, sorry. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak? It's open forum. I don't think so. Well, the next meeting of the Environmental Rules Board is tentatively set for Wednesday, May 12th, 2021 at 1:30 p.m. The meeting will be a remote meeting like today's. The date is tentative and subject to change. We will keep everyone updated when that is confirmed or another date is chosen. Is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a motion to
This
adjourn?
is Ted Nemec.
Is there a second?
RT Green, there's a second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. We are adjourned. You all be safe. It's snowing here now.